Tonight, for our bedtime story, I'm going to tell you about Cher Ami, the little pigeon who made a big flight. If you'd like to try one of my freshly baked cookies, visit sweetsbyreets.com. Sweet dreams! A long time ago, communication was much different. There were no telephones in pockets, radio signals that could cross an ocean, or satellites blinking quietly above the clouds. However, human beings still needed to send messages across great distances. For thousands of years, they used an unlikely partner to communicate. Who was this little partner? It was one of the smallest and plainest creatures on earth. It was just a little bird, a pigeon. It sounds almost too simple to be true. A pigeon, after all, is the bird most of us walk past without a second glance. They strut along sidewalks looking for crumbs. They crowd rooftops and window ledges. They are so brown and so ordinary that most of the time no one even notices them. However, pigeons carry a secret that took humans a very long time to fully understand. They can always find their way home. Scientists call it homing. A carrier pigeon taken far from the place where it was raised will orient itself using the Earth's magnetic field, the position of the sun, familiar landmarks, and even smells carried on the winds. It will climb into the sky, circle once, twice, perhaps 3 times, and then it will point itself like an arrow toward home and fly. It always flies in the right direction, with a certainty that has humbled navigators and astonished scientists for centuries. The ancient Egyptians used pigeons to carry messages as far back as 2900 BC. Persian kings relied on them. Roman commanders sent news of military victories home on pigeon wings. Genghis Khan built a network of pigeon posts across his vast empire so that information could travel faster than any horse. Medieval merchants used them to track the prices of goods in distant markets. In 1850, a man named Paul Julius Reuter, who would go on to found one of the world's most famous news agencies, used a fleet of 45 pigeons to carry stock market prices between Brussels and Aachen faster than the telegraph lines of the day could manage. The pigeon was, for most of human history, the internet of its time. By the early 20th century, the world had changed enormously. There were telegraphs and telephones and wireless radio. Modern armies had all of these tools at their disposal. And yet, when the First World War broke out in 1914, and soldiers disappeared into a labyrinth of muddy trenches that stretched across Europe, all of those modern tools revealed crucial weaknesses. Telephone wires got cut by artillery shells. Radio equipment was heavy, unreliable, and easily damaged. Runners, young soldiers sent on foot to carry messages between positions, were extremely brave but very vulnerable in the open. Messages got lost, messengers got killed, and in a war where the difference between victory and disaster could come down to a single piece of information arriving in time, the old ways suddenly looked very new again. Both sides in the war used carrier pigeons by the tens of thousands. The birds were carried in wicker baskets to the front lines. They were kept in mobile lofts, specially designed wagons or trucks that served as portable homes, so the pigeons would always know where to fly back to. A soldier with a message to send would take a pigeon from its basket, write the message on a thin slip of paper, roll it tightly, and slip it into a small metal canister attached to the bird's leg. Then he would hold the pigeon up to the sky, open his hands, and let it go. And the pigeon would do what pigeons do. It would go home. The Americans entered the First World War in 1917, and with them came the 77th Infantry Division, a unit made up largely of young men from New York City. These soldiers were not farmers or frontiersmen. Many of them had grown up on crowded city streets working in factories and shops and restaurants. They spoke dozens of languages between them: English, Yiddish, Italian, Polish, Russian. They were as diverse a group of soldiers as had ever fought under the American flag. And in the fall of 1918, in a dense and ancient forest in northeastern France called the Argonne, they found themselves in one of the most desperate situations. The Argonne forest was dark and tangled, full of ravines and shadows where the enemy could hide. Visibility was poor, communication was nearly impossible, and on October 2nd, 1918, a battalion of approximately 550 men pushed forward into the forest and found themselves cut off. History refers to them as the Lost Battalion. German forces surrounded them on 3 sides. They were trapped on a small hillside running low on food and ammunition, unable to move without coming under fire. Their commanding officer was a man named Charles Whittlesey, a former lawyer from New York City. It was looking bleak for the battalion. It felt like they truly were the Lost Battalion. They had almost no resources left, but they did still have some pigeons. Whittlesey decided to send the pigeons out with messages describing their position and asking for help. One by one, the birds were released, and one by one they flew. But the situation grew worse. Artillery shells began landing on the trapped battalion's position. Whittlesey made a horrific observation. The shells that were raining down weren't German. They were American, friendly fire. Soldiers on the other side of the forest, not knowing exactly where the Lost Battalion was, had begun shelling them by mistake. Men weren't dying from enemy fire, they were being shot by their own side's guns. Whittlesey had one pigeon left. One. Her name was Cher Ami, which is French for dear friend. She was a small bird, black and white checked, and she had already flown 2 missions in the Argonne. She was experienced, she was reliable, and she was the last hope. Whittlesey attached one last desperate message to her leg. It read, "We are along the road parallel to 276.4. Our own artillery is dropping a barrage directly on us. For heaven's sake, stop it." He held Cher Ami up to the sky and released her. What happened next was witnessed by multiple soldiers and recorded in military reports. Cher Ami climbed into the air and immediately came under fire. The Germans, who understood perfectly well that a homing pigeon meant a call for help, and as a result, aid, opened fire on the small bird with rifles and machine guns. Cher Ami was hit. She fell. Soldiers watching from the hillside felt their hearts drop with her. And then she climbed again. Shot through the chest, one eye blinded, one leg nearly severed, hanging by a tendon. Cher Ami climbed back into the smoke-filled sky, and she flew 25 miles in 25 minutes, through artillery fire and rifle shot, and the chaos of a battlefield that had swallowed thousands of men whole. She flew with Whittlesey's message still attached to her shattered leg. She flew a hero's mission. She arrived at the division's loft and collapsed on the landing board. The soldiers who found her could barely believe what they were looking at. A medic worked to save her. They carved a small wooden leg to replace the one she had lost. And the message, still in its canister, still attached to the ruined leg, was rushed to the commanding officers. The friendly fire stopped within the hour. Over the next 4 days, the Lost Battalion was reached and rescued. Of the 554 men who had gone into the forest, 197 came out alive. Charles Whittlesey knew they owed their lives to a small, checked pigeon with one eye and a wooden leg. Cher Ami was awarded the Croix de Guerre, one of France's highest military honors, with a gold palm for her service. She was celebrated in newspapers across America. She became a symbol of tenacity and bravery. She lived only a few months after returning home. The wounds she had suffered in the Argonne were too severe. She died on June 13, 1919. She was mounted by a taxidermist, and today she rests in the Smithsonian Institution's National Museum of American History in Washington, D.C., where she has been on display for over 100 years. Her small wooden leg is still attached. Her medals are nearby. Visitors sometimes stop in front of her case and stand very still for a moment. They are standing in front of a pigeon, after all, the most ordinary bird in the world. And yet something makes them pause. Something in the story of this small creature who was shot from the sky and climbed back up anyway, who carried one message through impossible odds because that was her purpose and she did not know how to abandon it. The next time you see a pigeon on a sidewalk walking its funny little walk and looking for crumbs, you might think of Cher Ami. You might remember that ordinary creatures are capable of extraordinary things, that small does not mean weak, that the most faithful hearts sometimes beat in the most overlooked bodies, and that sometimes the most important message in the world travels on the smallest wings. The end.